To discuss the protests and the situation currently developing in the United States, we are joined by Palika Makam on the program, media activist and senior U.S. program coordinator at the human rights organization Witness. Thank you very much for joining us live on France 24 and for speaking to us. Just to start us off, I'd like to ask your opinion firstly on the situation. Has it escalated too much? Is this just the fruit of years of police brutality going unchecked and people being fed up?
I think the latter is exactly correct. I mean, when we chant no justice, no peace, we mean it. It's hard to expect people to peacefully protest when they're not being treated with dignity and respect. I live right outside in the neighborhood where we saw a lot of the protest videos coming out of New York City last night. And you can see police officers were equally, if not more, aggressive. And they're the people, when we're talking about asymmetrical power structures, we have to remember that police have the authority. They have the higher likelihood that people are going to believe them. They're in uniform. So when you see videos of police officers, body checking protesters when they're not doing anything, pushing women to the ground, that only escalates the violence and calls for a landscape that cannot be resolved with quote unquote peace.
When the events surrounding George Floyd first came to light on Monday, of course, a lot of people spoke out against police brutality. People were very angry. They have been for a long time, if truth be told. But if we look at people's reactions today, including that of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, it's anger aimed at what he perceives as looting and rioting for the sake of it and not at a protest against matters at hand. Do you fear that this kind of behaviour by a minority can detract from the protest movement?
I think it's an unfortunate narrative that gets picked up in the media. The media tends to really focus on the looting that's happening and not on the reason why people are upset and protesting. I think if you're more upset about property damage and about someone taking from a giant corporation like Target than you are about an innocent black man being murdered by a police officer who we is a public servant and is supposed to be there to ensure our safety, then there's something really wrong with your values. And I think that kind of narrative skew is what happens. We've seen it, in Ferguson. We've seen it in Baltimore. We've seen it throughout the last decade here in the United States with high-profile police killings. And I'm sure that there's people out there who say, oh, no, they should protest peacefully. They should protest the right way. But unfortunately, we've also seen in the United States when, largely white protesters were very angrily and I'd say violently with oftentimes armed protesting the stay-at-home orders, police didn't react in the same way that they're reacting right now.
In the United States, there is, of course, a big respect. You were mentioning uniforms before for people who wear the uniform, whether it's soldiers, firemen, policemen. Do you think, however, that the fact that there is this respect for uniforms, that it allows people in uniform to sometimes get away with it and to forget that essentially they believe that they can do whatever they want, perhaps, and then not have to face the consequences?
I think that's exactly correct. The precedent in the United States is that, we don't take police officers and people in uniform to task. So many police officers have gone unaccountable. There's a lack of transparency in many states, like the state that I live in, New York, where we don't even have access as the general public to the disciplinary records of police officers. So often I'm sure that you've seen that the police officers that we see involved in high profile violence in videos, this is often their, 8th, 9th time coming up against some sort of a complaint or disciplinary action. And that goes unchecked because of a lack of accountability and transparency, which I'm sure aids in police officers feeling invincible.
And just finally, very quickly, Palika, do you believe that there needs to be a change also of example set from the very top? Of course, Donald Trump has been very criticised for his reactions. He says he's spoken to George Floyd's family directly. But does there need to be an institutional change to make this problem go away?
I absolutely think that the example needs to be set at the top in order to change our institutions. I mean, we've even seen over the last 2 days videos of journalists being targeted by police officers. I mean, to me, that's a signal change towards fascism. And it's, after, you hear the president talking about how awful journalists are, and you see him tweeting about how terrible journalists are, it's not that surprising that then state forces and police officers are then targeting journalists and abusing our free press.
Palika Makam, thank you very much for joining us on France 24 and for giving us that analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.